Alright, I'm not going to claim that the Spurs have solved the Thunder, but last night was a very big step for them towards completing this upset. We saw them tying the series back up at 2-2. This is essentially a 0-0 series, best of 3 at this point. OKC has 2 home games, assuming this goes to 7. That is not as big of an advantage as it may seem. The Spurs have been pretty good against OKC at home this season. I am fairly confident, honestly, in the Spurs' ability to win Game 5. That is kind of where I see coming. We will obviously see OKC and Dagnall make some adjustments. The big difference between Games 3 and 4 for me was that we saw the Spurs play Shea more straight up. Less double teams, just putting Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, a tough wing on him, something that he's not going to be able to get past very easily, and forcing him to beat them straight up. We saw this strategy not only shut down an SGA, but really the Thunder squad as a whole. When the Spurs were doubling Shea in Game 3, that gave him plenty of easy kick-out opportunities, and then OKC's best and brightest shooters were waiting on the wings, in the corners, ready to knock down those wide-open shots. We didn't see that tonight because the Spurs simply would not let anyone on OKC get open. No easy looks, no open opportunities at the basket, and so we saw OKC's offense stagnate in a major way. We saw Hartenstein be the only Thunder player with a bucket like halfway through the first quarter. That is amazing for the Spurs. They will live with him getting 10 points in the first quarter every day. What they don't want to live with is OKC's shooters being knocked down players, hitting down their open threes. They don't want to give up any open threes. In fact, so the Spurs game plan was amazing in this one. They executed about as well as they could have, held OKC to only 82 points, by far their lowest total of the season. It is going to be different heading into Game 5, again from the Spurs being in a hostile away environment. We do know that OKC have some of the most rabid fans in the league. I don't mean that in a good way. Not a fan of OKC's fans, but they are very active, very energetic, and so if OKC can start game out well, that energy in that arena might be too stifling for the Spurs. I do want everyone to keep in mind they are still a very young team, very inexperienced when it comes to the playoffs, as well as having a first-year head coach, Mitch Johnson. Obviously, he was the coach for most of last year, but this is his first full year as head coach, and so to make a deep playoff run is not expected. He has done a very good job, and I do applaud him on that, but you do wonder if it's going to catch up to him at some point. I do still like the Spurs' chances in this series. Not only is the coaching staff behind Mitch Johnson and Mitch Johnson himself great, but the whole team, top to bottom for San Antonio, was firing on all cylinders yesterday, being able to pull off a win, in spite of not honestly having the most amazing offensive game. Still being able to win it by 21 is just massive for the Spurs and their confidence. Every win at this point for this young San Antonio team is just so crucial to their ability to pull off this upset. Now, it is unfortunately not reasonable to assume that OKC is going to shoot 33% from the field and 18% from deep again. That simply won't happen, and so the Spurs do have to be better on offense themselves. They only shot 39% from the floor, 27% from 3. That was still enough to dog walk OKC. We did actually see the free throws end up in the Spurs' favor tonight, which I am all for. Anytime that OKC shoots less free throws than the other team, I am a happy man. On the floor, we saw Wemby with an insane plus 29 in only 31 minutes of action. We also see Devin Vassell and Stephon Castle with massive plus minuses. That is very promising for the Spurs. Stephon Castle had been a massive minus in their last 2 losses, so seeing him be a positive winning player again is huge for them. Bill Harper and Harrison Barnes as well off the bench. Big pluses, plus 25 for Harper, plus 13 for Harrison Barnes. Only 2 big minuses for the Spurs were Carter Bryant and Luke Cornett. That is kind of to be expected. Luke Cornett is simply no Wemby. The Spurs are obviously going to be a worse team with Cornett on the floor than Wemby, but he is still a good enough center that he is stopping it from being as bad as it could be. If the Spurs were having to rely on a Mason Plumlee, a Bismack Biyombo, they simply would be much worse off. So I don't want people clowning on Cornett, because it is simply always going to be a minus for him when he's seeing the court in these playoffs. but he's doing better than a lot of these Spurs other options would. For Carter Bryant, I'm sure if you're watching this video, you have seen everything going on with him. Him tearing up just when he made that bad turnover or foul, whatever it was. Mitch Johnson yelling at him. Obviously, he's a rookie, so I don't think it's a big deal. He's never going to be a make-it-break-it player for the Spurs win a game. It would like to see some productive minutes from him, but again, he only played 7 in this game. Really didn't have almost any impact. Well, he did get 1 rebound, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block, which is kind of cool. 4 fouls in 7 minutes. Not very good, but again, he's a rookie. They don't have to rely on him. It would be nice to get some production from him, but not at all required. Anything that they do get is just icing on the cake. For OKC, really just an abysmal offensive showing. Genuinely one of the worst offensive games I've seen from any team, like, in the playoffs ever. I haven't witnessed any games from that dead ball era, but it was really reminiscent of that. Shooting percentages like that you just don't see in the league anymore. They got production from just about no one. Shea had an inefficient night, 6 of 15 from the field, only 19 points. Looking down the box score, the only 2 players for OKC that shot 50% or above from the field were Isaiah Hartenstein at 6 of 11 and Nikola Topic, who played 4 minutes and made 1 basket. So that's obviously not ideal for OKC. They cannot have that. They scored 120 points in each of their last 2 games, both of those being wins. I do think that if their offense is able to reach those levels again, it's not really going to matter what the Spurs do. I don't really see San Antonio getting to 120 in regulation, so the X factor in this one really is OKC's offense. Obviously, the Spurs defense is going to affect OKC's offense, but the Thunder players are usually good enough to hit even contested looks. Last night, they simply couldn't, and then even the few wide open looks they did get, they couldn't convert either, which is going to make it impossible to get any kind of rhythm going, find any sort of consistent offense. So with the series knotted back at 2-2, looking ahead to Game 5, I do have the Spurs taking Game 5. I do think that OKC is obviously going to make some big adjustments to how they approach the Spurs defense, how they deal with their schemes. If we see J-Dub or AJ Mitchell back, this could also be completely different. The Thunder really had no one besides Shea tonight capable of creating their own offense. Jared McCain just had an abysmal night, went at 1 for 10 after having a heater last game. Jay Will, same thing, 1 for 7 from deep. Aaron Wiggins, 2 of 11. Even Alex Caruso only took 1 shot after scoring in double digits all throughout this series. So I do think that the Thunder will see more offense from all those guys, and if they could see their turn of either Mitchell or Williams, they could still be in a great spot. I do just think that these Spurs have figured out enough about how to play OKC that they will still be able to pull off a win. Whether that means they will win Game 6 as well, I'm less confident on. Having OKC having 2 games to try to figure out the Spurs adjustments is likely going to be enough for them to at least come out with a more complete idea of how to attack the Spurs again. We did see in games 2 and 3 that they really seemed to have solved the Spurs defense. Obviously, there is no final solution in the NBA playoffs. You just keep making adjustments, and you hope that your adjustments will allow you to be the first team to get to 4, but there is no solving any team in the postseason. You really just have to hope that your adjustments and your schemes are enough to get you those 4 wins. Path to a Spurs win in Game 5 has to be built upon the back of Wemby being aggressive. Both games where he has scored 30 points or more in this series, the Spurs have won. That is not a coincidence. When he is playing aggressively, not only is he better, but he is making his teammates better, getting them more open looks, creating better opportunities for them to slash, cut to the rim. I do think that if he can stay aggressive, not necessarily even getting the 30 points, but just being aggressive, hunting his shot when the ball does come his way, that's going to open everything up for San Antonio. And if they could have a big shooting night, which it does kind of feel like they're due for in this series, they really could break this thing wide open, make it a 3-2 lead with 2 games left to get 1 win, which they could absolutely then turn into a upset of the number 1 seed.
to see who's the